Welcome to Nocturnal Echoes. I'm your host, Bastian Crow. The stories you're about to hear come from a personal archive, a growing collection passed down through family, shared among friends, and discovered in old journals and time-worn letters. The kind of pages you don't find twice. With each episode, we'll share some of these ghostly encounters, brief flickers of the unknown, meant to quiet the noise and stress of the day, to guide your mind toward darker places, where stories linger. And once a month, we reach further back, the monthly special features, an entry pulled from one of our centuries-old diaries or letters, accounts that often feel more like warnings than memories. You never know if we'll follow the trail of a witch hunt from the 1600s, experience a nightmare recorded in the 1800s, or simply hear how those who came before us coped with the unexplained. Be sure to follow or like and subscribe so you don't miss when the past speaks again. Now, dim the lights. Find your favorite spot. Get ready. Nocturnal Echoes begins.
I took the job for the quiet. 3 months earlier, I'd quit my last gig as a hotel night auditor after one too many screaming guests and flickering hallway lights. When I saw the cemetery position posted, caretaker wanted, maintenance and patrol, nights preferred, it felt like exactly what I needed. Peace, routine, solitude. The cemetery was old. Not historic old, but still had that worn, weathered feeling. Most of the headstones dated back to the 1920s and 30s. Rows of tilted gray markers stretched out across the hills like a broken jawline. They called it White Hollow Cemetery, though there were no hollows or white stones to speak of, just mossy grass and iron gates that never quite closed right. My duties were simple: lock the gates by dusk, walk the grounds twice during the night, and report anything unusual to the cemetery office. I lived in a small caretaker's cottage just inside the north gate. It had no TV, just a radio and a fireplace that didn't work. That was fine. I wasn't here for comfort. I'd been there for a little over 2 weeks when I first noticed the lantern. It was maybe a little after 2 a.m. I'd just made my rounds, walking from the north gate to the west fence, cutting through the older section where the graves were closer together and often swallowed by ivy. That night I took a shortcut through one of the narrower rows between family plots when I saw it, maybe 20 or 30 yards away, near the edge of a small hill, a soft amber glow as if someone had left a lantern sitting on the ground. At first I figured it was a prank. Maybe some teenagers had snuck in before I locked the gates, planning a late-night scare. But there was no noise, no footsteps, just the quiet hum of crickets and the steady flicker of that distant light. I stood there for a minute, watching. It didn't move, didn't waver in the breeze. I called out, "Hey," but got nothing back. I stepped toward it. 1 pace, 2. The light didn't grow brighter, but it didn't fade either. I made it halfway down the hill when it went out. Snuffed, just like that. I stood there, eyes adjusting to the dark again, heart thumping a little louder than I liked. I scanned the graves. No shadows, no movement, just the soft sound of the wind combing through the trees. I told myself it was a trick of the eye, a streetlight reflecting off something. Maybe a flashlight left behind. Nothing supernatural. But the next night it happened again. This time I saw the light earlier, during my first walkthrough around 11:30. It appeared in the same spot. Still. I watched it longer, trying to see if someone was holding it. But the angle was strange. The light didn't move, didn't swing like a lantern would if someone were walking with it. It just sat there, waiting. Again, when I approached, it vanished before I got within 20 yards. By the third night, I stopped trying to rationalize it. I brought binoculars with me. When I saw the glow again, now expected like it had a schedule, I sat on a nearby bench and watched. Through the lenses, I could just barely make out the outline of something standing behind the light. It wasn't detailed. No face, just a shape. A figure. Tall. Motionless. I blinked. When I looked again, it was gone. I didn't sleep well that night. The next day, I visited the office and asked the manager, Frank, if anyone else ever reported strange lights. He didn't laugh. He didn't even seem surprised. "You're seeing the lantern?" he asked, like I'd mentioned spotting a common squirrel. I nodded. Frank scratched the back of his neck, then leaned forward like he didn't want anyone else to hear. "Used to be a groundskeeper here in the 70s. Real quiet guy. Liked working nights, said it helped him think. One winter he never showed up for his shift. Thought maybe he quit. But then spring came, and one of the gravediggers found him near the fence line, up by that hill where the hawthorn graves are. What happened to him?" Frank shook his head. "Still don't know. No wounds, no trauma. Looked like he just stopped breathing. Found his old oil lantern sitting beside him." He paused. "Sometimes people see it still, usually around this time of year." "Why this time of year?" Frank shrugged. "Closest we can guess is that's when he died. We never found the exact date. Just a guess." That night I decided not to approach the light. I sat on the same bench as before. I brought a thermos of coffee, a blanket, and a notebook. I wanted to observe, to understand. At 11:24 p.m., right on time, the lantern appeared. It glowed low, almost mournful. I stared at it, unblinking as long as I could. This time I didn't try to make sense of it. I just watched. Then I did something stupid. I whispered quietly, "Do you need help?" as if they could hear me from this far away. Nothing happened at first. The light remained steady. But then it grew, slowly, like someone had adjusted a flame inside. It didn't flicker. It expanded. Soft at first, then brighter, almost warm. And then it started moving. Not toward me, but sideways, gliding just above the grass, weaving between tombstones. I stood, heart hammering. The figure behind it became more distinct. Tall, stooped shoulders, wearing what looked like a long coat. Still featureless, but there, present. It reached the edge of the cemetery, then stopped near a stone that had broken in half. The light dimmed. Then the figure turned its head toward me, and the lantern went out. I didn't sleep in the cottage that night. The next morning I returned with gloves and a small shovel. I went to the cracked headstone where the figure had stopped. The name was nearly worn away, but I could still make out a few letters. No dates. No epitaph. I started digging. Only a few inches down, my spade hit something. Not a coffin, just a metal. I cleared the dirt away and found a rusted old lantern still intact. Glass cracked, handle bent, but unmistakable. I didn't touch it. I called Frank. He came with 2 of the grounds crew. They didn't ask questions, just pulled the lantern out, placed it in a box, and carried it away like it was a fragile relic. That night the light didn't appear. It hasn't since. But sometimes around midnight I still hear the faint sound of something clinking against metal, like an old handle swinging in the wind. I tell myself it's the gate, but I keep the binoculars close, just in case. I pulled into town just after dark, but it took me a while to find the hotel. It wasn't much to look at, just a 2-story roadside place with peeling paint and a flickering vacancy sign. But it was cheap, and it was close to Sarah's house. That was good enough. Sarah and I had been dating long distance for almost a year now. We were young, and the plan was simple. I'd stay in town for a few days while she finished packing. Then we'd leave together, drive back to my place, and start fresh. She still lived with her parents, so crashing at her place wasn't an option. A cheap motel room would do just fine. The front desk clerk gave me a tired smile, slid a key card across the counter, and told me I'd be in room 208, second floor near the end of the hall. I hauled my bag up the stairs, past faded carpet and humming vending machines until I reached my room. Across the hall, I noticed room 209's door was shut, a do not disturb sign dangling from the handle. My room itself was exactly what I expected, outdated but clean enough. A single bed, a desk bolted to the wall, and an old boxy TV that probably hadn't been updated in years. I tossed my bag down and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone, waiting for Sarah to text that she was off work. That first night was uneventful, mostly. Around midnight, just as I was dozing off, I heard something from the room next door. Muffled thuds like footsteps pacing back and forth. Then came a faint tapping, irregular but persistent. I figured someone had checked in late. Maybe they were unpacking. No big deal. I pulled a pillow over my head and went back to sleep. The next morning, Sarah picked me up for breakfast. We spent the day together, laughing, running errands, helping her box up her things. By the time she dropped me back at the hotel that night, I was exhausted. That's when I noticed it again. I was sitting at the desk, scrolling through my phone, when the noises started back up. First, it was a faint knock, 3 slow raps on the wall between my room and 209. I froze, waiting. A minute later, there was another set, louder. I pressed my ear against the wall. That's when I heard it. A man's voice, low, muttering, words I couldn't quite catch. Then, nothing. I stepped back, feeling a little nervous. Maybe it was just TV. I tried to tell myself that. Thin walls, late-night infomercials, perfectly normal. But around 1 a.m., the noises escalated. The pacing came back. Heavy, deliberate footsteps moving back and forth. I heard something scrape against the floor, like furniture being dragged. Then, without warning, 3 sharp knocks hit the shared wall so hard my bed frame rattled. I bolted upright. "Hey," I shouted. "Can you cut it out?" Silence. I waited, listening. No footsteps, no voices, just the dull hum of the motel's air conditioning. I barely slept that night. By the 3rd day, I'd gotten bold enough to mention it to the desk clerk. "Hey, is anyone in 209? I asked casually as I purchased a soda at the vending machine. She glanced up from her computer. "Not that I know of. Let me check." She tapped at her keyboard for a moment, then frowned. "Nope, 209's been empty for a while." I blinked at her. "You're sure?" "Because I've been hearing—" She cut me off. "Positive," she said. "Housekeeping's got it marked as unoccupied. It's actually been closed off for a long time. Maintenance issues." That didn't make sense. I'd heard pacing, talking, knocking loud enough to shake the wall. "You're telling me nobody's in there?" She shrugged uncomfortably. "I can have someone check if you want, but it's locked up tight." I laughed it off, pretending it didn't bother me. But that night, lying in bed with my eyes on the ceiling, every creak of the building set my nerves on edge. Around 12:30, it started again. Slow, deliberate footsteps. I sat up, holding my breath. They moved from one end of the wall to the other, back and forth. Then came the knocking. 3 sharp bangs, louder than ever. I leapt out of bed, grabbed my key card, and stormed out into the hallway. Room 209's door stood silent, the Do Not Disturb sign still swaying slightly from where it hung. I pounded on the door. "Whoever's in there, cut it out." No response. I pressed my ear against the door. The air on the other side felt still, like an empty room. Finally, I went back to bed, but I didn't sleep. On my last night in town, things got worse. I was lying there staring at the ceiling when I heard the voice again. Clearer this time. It was deep, raspy, and it seemed to seep right through the wall. "Get out!" I bolted upright. My heart was hammering. "Hello?" I said, my voice shaking. The footsteps resumed, faster now, almost frantic. Something slammed against the wall so hard my headboard rattled. "Enough," I shouted. I grabbed my phone, threw on my shoes, and marched straight to the front desk. The night manager, a middle-aged guy with dark circles under his eyes, looked up as I approached. "Room 209, I said. "Whoever's in there is pounding on the walls and yelling. I've had it." His face went pale. "There's no one in 209, he said quietly. "Yes, there is," I shot back. "I've heard them every night. Footsteps, knocking, a voice." He stared at me for a long moment, then sighed. "Follow me," he said. We climbed the stairs together, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. He stopped in front of the room 209, pulled out a keyring and unlocked the door. The hinges creaked as he pushed it open. The room was dark, empty. Dust motes floated in the pale glow from the hall. But what caught my eye was the state of the place. The mattress was bare. The curtains were half ripped from the rod. The carpet near the wall we shared looked stained, like something had soaked in deep over the years. And on that wall, right where my bed had been on the other side, were deep gouges. Scratches, long and uneven, like someone had dragged their fingernails down the plaster again and again. The manager exhaled slowly. "About 10 years ago," he said, "a man stayed in this room. Long-term guest. Quiet guy, kept to himself. One night another guest heard banging, like what you described. Called the desk. By the time we got here..." He trailed off. He'd hanged himself from the curtain rod. My stomach turned. "Maintenance closed it down after that," he said. "But sometimes, guests in 208 still complain about noises." He hesitated. "I've heard it myself once or twice." We stood there in silence, staring at the empty room. "Do you want to switch rooms?" he asked finally. I shook my head. "Nope. I'm checking out early." I packed my bag in what felt like a minute, checked out on the spot, and drove across town to another hotel. It cost twice as much, but I didn't care. I spent the night wide awake, staring at the ceiling, half expecting to hear those same knocks follow me across town. When Sarah and I left the next morning, I glanced back at that motel in my rearview mirror. Room 209's window stared blankly out at the empty parking lot. I don't know what I heard in that room, or what still lingers there. But sometimes late at night, I swear I can still hear those 3 sharp knocks in my head. I live alone, in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of town. It's one of those cul-de-sacs where nothing ever happens, where you get used to the sound of crickets at night and the occasional distant bark of a dog. It was just after midnight when I decided to take out the trash. I remember because I'd been half asleep on the couch, the TV still murmuring in the background. I got up, tied off the bag, and hit the garage door opener. The motor groaned awake and the door rattled upward. The air outside was warm, humid even. It had been a long, hot day, the kind where the pavement still radiates heat after dark. I stepped out barefoot and tossed the bag into the bin near the curb. The street was empty. Every porch light was off, except mine. When I stepped back inside, I pressed the garage door button again. The motor hummed. The door came down halfway, and then stopped. I frowned. The light on the opener flashed twice, a sensor interruption. I bent down, checking the line between the 2 safety sensors near the floor. Nothing there. No cobweb. No debris. I pressed the button again. The door lowered further, almost to the ground, then jerked back up, like it had been yanked by invisible hands. I sighed and muttered under my breath, then stepped back out into the driveway. I scanned the floor. Still nothing. That's when I noticed movement. Across the cul-de-sac, near the edge of the streetlight's glow, a figure stood perfectly still. I froze. They were dressed in a long black trench coat, collar pulled high. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed their face. I stared for a few seconds before I decided to speak. "Hello?" I called out. The figure didn't move. I glanced back at the garage, door still open, and stepped further out onto the driveway. "Do you need something?" No answer. The figure stood just at the edge of the darkness, like it had chosen that spot on purpose. I looked around the neighborhood, half expecting to see a car, a dog walker, something. But it was just me. I took another step forward. That's when it shifted. Not a step, not a wave, just a tilt of the head, like it was studying me. Goosebumps rose along my arms despite the warm night. "Look," I said louder now, "if you need help." The figure turned, smoothly, slowly, and then it started walking. Not toward me, away. Something in me, maybe adrenaline, maybe stupidity, pushed me forward. I jogged across the street, my bare feet slapping against the pavement. "Hey," I called. The figure didn't speed up, didn't run. It just moved steadily, like it knew exactly where it was going. I followed. It turned the corner at the end of the cul-de-sac, into the darker stretch where the streetlights thinned out. When I rounded the corner, it was gone. The street ahead was empty, silent. I stood there, heart pounding, my eyes darting between shadows. Every driveway, every porch seemed darker than usual. Behind me, I heard it, the faint hum of my garage door motor. I spun around. The door was closing. I ran. Bare feet on hot asphalt, lungs burning. I sprinted back up the street. I dove through the shrinking gap just as the garage door hit the ground, skidding hard across the concrete floor. For a second, I just lay there, gasping. My palms and forearms burned from the scrape. Then I scrambled to my feet and slammed my hand against the wall button, stopping the motor from lifting the door again. That's when I heard it, a slow, deliberate step, right outside the garage door, followed by another. I froze, every muscle locked tight. Then came a faint scrape, like something brushing against the door from the outside. Another scrape, lower this time, near the bottom corner of the door. I backed up slowly. My phone was in the kitchen. Another scrape, and then faintly, a single knock. I nearly dropped the wrench I'd grabbed from my workbench. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Another knock, louder. I flicked off the garage light, plunging myself into darkness. Maybe it was stupid, but something in my gut told me, whatever it was, it didn't like the light. I crept back inside, locked the interior door, and grabbed my phone. I waited, pressed against the door, listening. Minutes passed, but finally, I worked up the nerve to check. I cracked the door open and peeked into the garage. It was empty. I exhaled shakily, turned on the light, scanned the door. No marks, no sign anyone had been there. I told myself it was my imagination. Stress, fatigue. I went back inside, locked every door and window, and turned off the lights. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I checked the footage from my security camera. The one over the garage had a clear view of the driveway and street. I scrolled through the timeline. Midnight, 12:10, 12:20. There I was, carrying the trash out. Then, nothing. No sign of the figure. No sign of me chasing anyone down the street. The camera showed me calmly walking back in, and a wide, empty driveway. I sat back staring at the screen, my stomach twisting. It didn't make sense. Was it just a dream? That's when I noticed the stinging on my palms and forearms. I looked down. Thin red scrapes ran across my skin, angry and raw. And then it hit me. I remembered hitting the ground, the rough scrape of the driveway under my hands, as I dove through the garage door, just before it slammed shut behind me. I remembered it vividly. The camera might not have seen it, but I knew it happened. I shut the laptop and pulled the blinds closed, because whatever I'd seen out there, it was real.
Thank you for listening to tonight's episode of Nocturnal Echoes. If tonight's story stayed with you or helped quiet the weight of the day, consider liking, subscribing, or sharing the show with someone who finds comfort in the company of shadows. I'm your host, Bastion Crow. Until next time, keep your eyes open and the lights low.